Who gave you that bruise? Dominic Vale did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Across the polished floor of his private study, Grace Harper stood frozen beneath the amber desk light, one side of her face hidden behind dark hair. Outside, rain struck the windows of Blackthorn House like bullets. Inside, the most feared man on the Massachusetts coast stared at the purple mark along his maid's jaw. Grace had spent 2 years surviving by staying invisible. Keep working. Keep quiet. Never let powerful men notice you. But that night, someone had already broken her silence with his hands. And when Dominic learned the truth, protection would become possession, an old debt would threaten innocent blood, and Grace would discover that the safest place in the world could also be a cage. Stay until the end. Like the video and comment where you're watching from before Dominic asks the question again. 48 hours before Dominic Vale asked who had bruised her face, Grace Harper stood on a ladder with a silver pin between her teeth, forcing a velvet curtain to hang straight. The curtain weighed almost as much as she did. It fell from the ceiling of Blackthorn House in charcoal folds, swallowing the morning light from the Atlantic. Beyond, the glass waves struck the granite cliffs and burst into white spray. Grace reached higher. The ladder shifted beneath her shoe. She caught herself against the wall and waited for the wood to stop trembling. No one noticed. That was the point. Blackthorn House employed 23 people indoors and nearly twice that number across the grounds, garages, kitchens, docks, and security stations. Still, the mansion could pass an entire day without acknowledging the people who kept it alive. Meals appeared. Floors shone. Fires were lit before rooms became cold. Blood vanished from marble before sunrise. The Vale family did not ask how any of it happened. They expected the house to obey. Grace pressed the final pin into place and climbed down. Mrs. Whitmore waited below with a clipboard against her narrow chest. At 58, the head housekeeper had the posture of a woman who considered exhaustion a private weakness. "Left side is lower," she said. Grace looked up. It was not. "Yes, Mrs. Whitmore." She climbed again. At Blackthorn House, being correct mattered less than being quiet. The estate sat on 30 acres outside Gloucester, Massachusetts, where the coastal road narrowed between salt marshes and black pine. Tourists sometimes slowed near the iron gates, hoping to glimpse the mansion on the bluff. They saw stone walls, ivy, and a slate roof. They did not see the cameras beneath the eaves, the motion sensors in the hedges, or the armed men inside the gatehouse. Grace saw all of it. She knew which halls were monitored and which cameras had narrow blind spots. She knew the service elevator groaned before stopping on the second floor. She knew never to enter the West Wing after 10 at night, even if she heard glass breaking. Most of all, she knew the 3 rules that kept employees alive. Do not ask questions. Do not repeat what you hear. Never make Dominic Vale notice you. Mrs. Whitmore gathered the staff in the kitchen every morning. The cooks stood near the preparation tables. The maids formed a row beside the pantry. Drivers and house attendants listened while she read assignments. That morning she closed her clipboard. "Mr. Vale has guests arriving from Boston at noon. No employee enters the east dining room unless summoned. No one speaks to the guests. No one remains in the corridor after service." Her eyes paused on Lucy, a maid hired less than a month earlier. "If a door is closed, it is closed for a reason." Lucy nodded. "Mr. Vale values silence," Mrs. Whitmore continued. "If you cannot provide it, you will not remain employed here." Grace lowered her eyes. 2 years earlier, she had believed silence was what happened when a conversation ended. At Blackthorn House, silence was labor. It was something the staff produced every day and were paid to maintain. The money was the only reason she stayed. At noon, Grace carried water glasses through a service passage behind the east dining room. Male voices traveled through the paneled wall. She recognized Victor Shaw first. The container was signed out in Chelsea and never reached the yard. Another man answered. The driver claims he was redirected. By whom? He says he never saw a face. A pause followed. Then Dominic Vale spoke. People remember faces when they believe forgetting will kill them. The other men fell quiet. Grace kept walking. She did not want to know what was inside the container or what would happen to the driver. Knowledge had weight in that house, carried too much, and someone eventually noticed. In the butler's pantry, her phone vibrated inside her apron pocket. Personal phones were forbidden during service, but it vibrated again. Grace slipped into the laundry room and checked the screen. 3 missed calls from an unknown Boston number. 1 message from Ethan. He had sent a photograph of an engine suspended above a garage bay. His hands were visible at the bottom of the frame, black with grease. First one I rebuilt without Danny taking over. You would be proud. Grace smiled. Ethan was 19 and still believed effort led somewhere good. She had protected that belief as fiercely as she protected his life. She typed, I am proud of you. I always am. Before she could send it, the unknown number called again. Grace answered. Hello, Grace Harper? She closed her eyes. Yes. This is Mr. Donnelly's office. There was no office. There was a back room above a betting shop in South Boston, where men wrote numbers in ledgers and decided how much fear was worth. I made the transfer on Friday. You made a transfer. That was the amount we agreed on. That was the amount you could afford. Grace lowered her voice. How much is left? 90,000? Her fingers tightened around the phone. That is more than last month. Interest. We agreed the interest would stop if I paid every week. Your father agreed to many things. My father is dead. The debt is not. Grace looked through the glass in the door. A shadow passed in the corridor. I need more time. You have had 2 years. I have paid every Friday for 2 years. You have paid enough to keep us patient. Paper moved on the other end. Your brother still works at Keegan Auto on Dorchester Avenue. Her stomach went cold. Leave Ethan out of this. Then stop making him relevant. He knows nothing. That makes him easier to talk to. I will send more next week. How much I do not know. Know by Friday. The line went dead. Grace stood beside the machines, listening to their heavy rotation. On the screen, Ethan's photograph waited above the unfinished message. She sent the reply, then transferred everything left from her paycheck except $40. Her account balance dropped to $37.12. Grace stared at the number and returned to work. By 1, black cars were lined beneath the covered entrance. Grace knelt near a console table in the east corridor polishing the wood as Victor Shaw Mason Reed and Dominic Vale approached. Victor was lean-controlled and marked by a scar through his left eyebrow. Mason was broad enough to make the corridor seem narrow. Dominic came last. Grace had seen him hundreds of times and had never spoken more than 6 words to him. He was 35, with black hair, an unreadable face, and eyes that remained calm even when everyone around him became afraid. The men beside him looked dangerous because they belonged to him. Victor was speaking. If Harbor Police opens the container records, we lose the route for 6 months. Then they will not open them, Dominic said. The detective is ambitious. Ambition is only dangerous when someone can afford it. Grace kept polishing. A folded document lay beneath the console table. It must have slipped from one of their files. She could see a blue company seal and several typed numbers. She did not read them. Grace picked up the paper. Mr. Vale. The men stopped. Dominic turned and his attention landed on her with physical weight. Grace held out the document. You dropped this. Mason looked at the paper. Victor looked at Grace. Dominic took it. You did not open it. No, sir. How do you know it belongs to me? It fell behind you. Dominic watched her for a moment. Thank you. You're welcome, sir. They continued down the corridor. Grace knelt again. She did not see Dominic glance back. At 3, the kitchen doors struck the wall. Travis Vale entered wearing a tan coat over a wrinkled shirt. Sunglasses covered his eyes despite the gray weather. He smelled of cologne cigarettes and alcohol. He took a piece of chicken from a preparation tray. The head chef stared at him. "That is for the luncheon." Travis bit into it. Then they should have arrived sooner. He moved between the tables as cooks shifted away. Lucy was arranging pastries near the pantry. Travis stopped behind her. "New girl." Lucy's shoulders tightened. "Yes, Mr. Vale." "Turn around." She obeyed. Travis lowered his glasses and looked her over. "You always this nervous?" "No, sir." "You should be. Nervous women pay attention." He reached toward the ribbon at her collar. Lucy stepped back. The tray rattled. Mrs. Whitmore appeared from the pantry. "Mr. Vale, your room has been prepared." "Did I ask about my room? No." "Then why are you telling me Dominic requested that you meet him upstairs?" Travis's amusement faded. He dropped the half-eaten chicken onto the pastry tray and left. Nobody moved until the doors stopped swinging. Later, Grace found Lucy folding napkins in the linen room. "You should tell Mrs. Whitmore," Grace said. Lucy laughed without humor. She was standing there. Grace had no answer. Lucy folded another napkin. "He has done worse." Grace looked at her. Lucy immediately closed herself off. "I did not say that." "Lucy, do not let him corner you." She gathered the napkins and left. Rain began after sunset. By 9, it struck the kitchen windows in hard sheets. Wind rolled in from the Atlantic and shook the oldest sections of the house. Grace scrubbed the preparation counters, emptied the pantry bins, and tied 2 heavy trash bags. The outdoor compactor stood beyond the service yard near the garages. Normally, a kitchen porter handled it, but he had gone home with a fever. Grace lifted the first bag and pushed through the rear door. Cold rain hit her face. The yard was paved with old stone that became slick during storms. Floodlights buzzed above the garage doors. One flickered, turning the yard bright, then dim, then bright again. Grace threw the first bag into the compactor. When she returned with the second, she heard glass tap against brick. Travis stood beneath the garage awning with a bottle in one hand. His coat was gone. His shirt was open at the throat. Rain blew across his shoes, but he did not seem to feel it. Working late, sweetheart Grace stopped. "Good evening, Mr. Vale." She started toward the compactor. Travis moved into her path. "Did you hear me?" "Yes, sir." "Then look at me." Grace kept her eyes on his tie. "We are trained not to disturb the family. That is not what I asked." She raised her gaze briefly. Travis smiled. "There she is." Grace tried to move around him. He shifted with her. "Mrs. Whitmore is waiting. Mrs. Whitmore waits for everyone. I need to finish my work." "You people say that like work makes you important." Rain soaked through Grace's uniform. "Please move." His smile disappeared. "What did you say I said I need to finish, Mr. Vale?" "No. You told me to move." He stepped closer. Grace backed toward the brick wall beside the service door. Travis followed until she had nowhere else to go. Up close, the whiskey was stronger. "You were in the East Hall today," he said. Grace said nothing. "You gave Dominic something. A paper he dropped. He thanked you." It was nothing. She tried to leave. Travis caught her wrist. The trash bag fell between them. Grace looked toward the service door. It was only 12 feet away. The kitchen beyond it was filled with people. She could call out, but Travis was Dominic's cousin. His last name was carved into the stone above the front entrance. Grace had no name that mattered inside those walls. "Let go of me." His fingers tightened. "Did you just give me another order? You are hurting me." He pulled her closer. Grace planted one hand against his chest. Travis looked down at it. Something ugly moved across his face. He seized her jaw. His thumb pressed into one cheek while his fingers dug beneath the other. "Do not touch me. You think because Dominic looked at you, you are too good for me. I do not know what you mean. Do not lie." He forced her face upward. Grace saw the red veins in his eyes. "Mrs. Whitmore will notice I am gone." Travis's mouth tightened. "You think she can protect you?" Grace stopped fighting. She had learned that men like him often became crueler when resistance made them feel weak. Her arms went still. Her expression emptied. Travis stared at her. "Smile." Grace did not. "I said smile. Please, Mr. Vale." He shoved her. There was no warning. Her boots slid across the rain-covered stone. Her left cheek struck the brick corner beside the service door. Light exploded behind her eyes. Grace heard the impact before she felt it. Then pain tore through her jaw and climbed toward her temple. She fell to one knee, tasting blood. The trash bag split near her hand. Coffee grounds and vegetable scraps spread across the stones. Travis stood under the light. For half a second, he looked sober. Grace waited for him to help. He took another drink. "You should watch where you are walking." The service door opened behind him. A kitchen worker stepped out, saw Travis, and lowered his eyes. Travis entered the house. The worker looked at Grace. She saw fear on his face, not concern. He disappeared without helping her. Grace remained in the rain until the yard stopped moving. Her fingertips came away red when she touched her cheek. She gathered the spilled trash and carried it to the compactor. The machine swallowed it with a grinding roar. Inside the staff bathroom, Grace locked the door and leaned over the sink. The fluorescent light showed a scrape near her cheekbone and swelling along her jaw. The bruise had not darkened yet, but it was already rising beneath her skin. She pressed a cold towel to her face. Her eyes watered. Grace did not cry. Crying changed nothing, and she had 10 minutes left on her shift. Someone knocked. "Grace." "Mrs. Whitmore." "Yes." "You have been in there 6 minutes. I felt sick." "Can you finish?" Grace looked at her reflection. Blood stained the inside of her lip. The towel trembled against her cheek. "Yes." "Then finish." Mrs. Whitmore walked away. Grace applied concealer and pulled her hair loose. The dark strands covered the left side of her face. When she returned to the kitchen, nobody asked what happened. The worker who had seen her outside kept his back turned. At midnight, Grace sat on the bed in her narrow basement room and checked her phone. Ethan had written, "You still coming Sunday? I found that diner you liked when we were kids." Grace touched her swelling cheek. She typed, "Would not miss it." Then she deleted the words. Work changed the schedule. "Soon, I promise." Ethan replied immediately. "You work too much." Grace set the phone face down. The next morning, the bruise had turned purple. By afternoon, it spread along her jaw in dark shadows. Concealer collected in the swollen skin and made it worse. Grace volunteered to clean unused guest rooms. She polished silver alone. She ate after everyone else had left. Whenever she heard Travis's voice, she moved in the opposite direction. Once, from behind a service door, she heard him laughing near the staircase. The sound made her jaw ache. At 11 that night, Mrs. Whitmore entered the pantry carrying a silver tray. A cup of black coffee sat beside a leather accounting book. "Take this to Mr. Vale's study." Grace's stomach tightened. "Could Daniel take it? Daniel has gone home." I spilled polish on my sleeve. Mrs. Whitmore looked at the clean fabric. "Wash your hands." Grace turned her uninjured side toward her. "Mrs. Whitmore, I do not think I should enter the study." The older woman studied her face. Grace let her hair fall farther forward. Suspicion appeared in Mrs. Whitmore's eyes, then vanished beneath fatigue. "Mr. Vale has been waiting 10 minutes. Grace thought of the Donnelly man saying Ethan's workplace. She thought of $37.12 in her account. She washed her hands and lifted the tray. The porcelain cup rattled once. Grace crossed the east wing slowly. The carpets swallowed her footsteps. Rain pressed against the windows. 2 armed guards stood outside the study. Mason Reed was one of them. His eyes moved over the tray, her hands and the side of her face hidden beneath her hair. He opened the door. Grace stepped inside. Firelight moved across shelves of dark books. A brass lamp burned on the desk. Dominic sat behind it reading a file. He did not look up. Set it beside the ledger. Grace crossed the study with the tray balanced between both hands. The room was warmer than the hallway, but she could not stop shivering. Firelight slid across the polished floor. Rain moved against the windows in silver sheets. Dominic continued reading. Grace placed the coffee beside his right hand and opened the leather book to the marked page. She kept her head turned. A strand of hair slipped behind her shoulder. Dominic looked up. His fingers stopped above the cup. The silence changed first. Grace felt it settle over the room before she understood why. She looked toward him and saw his eyes fixed on the left side of her face. "Stop." She froze. Dominic placed his pen beside the file. He rose slowly and came around the desk. Grace stepped back. He stopped less than a foot away. "Look at me." Her mouth had gone dry. She turned her face toward him. The bruise was no longer hidden. Under the brass lamp, the purple spread across her cheekbone and down to her jaw. Concealer clung to the swollen skin in pale streaks. Dominic raised one hand. Grace flinched before she could stop herself. Her shoulders tightened. Her eyes closed. His hand remained in the air. When Grace looked again, something in his face had changed. Not softened. Sharpened. He lowered his fingers until they hovered beside the bruise. "Who gave you that bruise I slipped on the service stairs?" "No." The word was quiet. Grace stared at the buttons of his shirt. It was raining. "I lost my footing." Dominic studied her. "If you fell, your palms would be scraped." Grace curled her fingers into her apron. "They are not. I caught myself against the wall. Then the injury would spread across your temple." His gaze moved along the mark. "This begins at the jaw. Someone held your face. Then you struck brick or stone." Grace felt the room closing around her. "I do not want trouble. You already have trouble. If I say anything, I could lose my job." "You will not lose your job. You do not understand. I understand that someone inside my house put his hands on you." Dominic stepped closer. "And now you are protecting him." Grace raised her eyes. "I am protecting my brother." For the first time, Dominic looked away from the bruise. "What does your brother have to do with this?" Grace should not have said it. The words had escaped because fear had made her careless. Nothing. That was not nothing. She shook her head. Dominic's voice remained controlled. "Grace." Hearing her name from him felt more intimate than it should have. "How do you know my name? I know everyone who lives under my roof." She almost laughed. Nobody in that house knew the people below the stairs. Dominic saw the disbelief on her face. "You work 6 days a week. You send most of your wages to an account connected to the Donnelly crew. Your brother works in Dorchester. Your father died owing them money." Grace forgot to breathe. "You investigated me. I investigate everyone who enters this house. Then you already know why I cannot lose this job." "Yes." "Then let me go." "No." The answer was immediate. Dominic lowered his voice. "Tell me who hurt you." Grace looked toward the door. The guards outside would not help her. The bruise pulsed with every heartbeat. Dominic waited without repeating himself. A tear escaped and moved down Grace's uninjured cheek. Dominic caught it with his thumb. The touch was brief and unexpectedly gentle. Grace hated that gentleness. It made the room feel more dangerous. "You will keep your job," he said. "Your brother will remain untouched. Now tell me." Grace closed her eyes. "Travis." Dominic's hand fell away. Nothing moved in his face. "My cousin." She nodded. He had been drinking. "Do not defend him." "I am not." "You are explaining him." He pushed me. I slipped. He did not punch me. Dominic turned from her and walked to the desk. The careful way he moved frightened her more than rage would have. He picked up the telephone and dialed. "Mason." Grace listened to the rain. "Find Travis." A pause. "Take him to the old fish plant on Harbor Road." Another pause. "Keep him conscious until I arrive." Dominic returned the receiver to its cradle. Grace stared at him. "What are you going to do?" He looked at the bruise again. "I am going to make sure he understands what he touched. He is your family." Dominic's expression hardened. "Family is not permission." Grace moved toward the door. "Please do not kill him." Dominic's eyes lifted to hers. The request seemed to surprise him. "He hurt you, and you are asking me to spare him. I am asking not to be the reason someone dies. You are not the reason. You would not be doing this if he had not touched me." Dominic held her gaze. "No, I would not." Grace swallowed. "Then I am the reason." He came around the desk again. "You are the witness. He made the choice. That will not matter when I wake up tomorrow knowing he disappeared because I said his name." Dominic studied her face for a long moment. "He will remain alive." Relief came too quickly. Then she heard the rest in his silence. "What will you do to him enough?" Grace stepped back. Dominic reached for the study door and opened it. Mason stood outside now. Rain darkened the shoulders of his coat. Dominic spoke without looking at him. "Take Miss Harper to her room. She is relieved from duty for 3 days with pay." Grace looked at Dominic. "I can work." "No. I need the hours. You will be paid. I do not want special treatment. You needed a doctor 2 days ago." Her face burned. Dominic's voice lowered. "You are going to your room. Lock the door. Open it only for Mrs. Whitmore Mason or the physician I send. Protection from whom?" Dominic glanced down the corridor. He did not answer. Mason stepped aside. Grace left the study. The door closed behind her with a sound like a verdict. The basement room had never felt small until that night. Grace sat on the bed with the lamp off while the radiator knocked behind the wall. Every footstep in the corridor pulled her upright. She imagined Travis returning from Harbor Road. She imagined Mrs. Whitmore handing her a cardboard box. She imagined the Donnelly crew waiting outside Ethan's garage. At 4 a.m, her phone still showed no missed calls. At 6, someone knocked. She stood behind the locked door. "Who is it, Mrs. Whitmore?" Grace opened it. The head housekeeper held a tray with toast tea and a bowl of fruit. "You are not to report for duty." "I know." Mrs. Whitmore's eyes moved to the bruise. This time Grace did not hide it. Something close to anger appeared in the older woman's expression, then vanished. "Why did you not tell me?" Grace looked at her. "Would you have believed me?" Mrs. Whitmore did not answer. "Would you have protected me from him?" The tray trembled slightly in her hands. "I would have done what I could. That is not the same thing." "No," Mrs. Whitmore said. "It is not." She placed the tray on the dresser. "Do not leave this room unless Mason comes for you." "Did Mr. Vale send Travis away?" Mrs. Whitmore's mouth tightened. "You should not ask questions. You taught me that." "Yes." For the first time, she sounded ashamed of it. She left without saying more. Dr. Samuel Pierce arrived shortly after noon with Mason behind him. His silver hair, charcoal suit, and black medical bag made him look more like a university surgeon than a man summoned to a mafia estate. Grace let him in. "Sit." Grace obeyed. Dr. Pierce put on gloves and examined her pupils with a small light. "Any vomiting?" "None." "Loss of consciousness?" "I do not think so." "You would know." There was a white flash. Then I was on the ground. He touched the edge of her cheekbone. Pain shot through her face. Grace inhaled sharply. "No fracture," he said. "You were fortunate." She almost smiled. Nothing about the past 2 days felt fortunate. He checked her jaw and the inside of her mouth. "The cut will heal. The swelling should begin to recede within 48 hours. He gave her 2 amber bottles and a jar of cream, 1 tablet with food. Use the cream morning and evening, cold compress for 20 minutes at a time. Grace looked at the medication. "How much do I owe you?" "Nothing. I can pay next week. Mr. Vale has settled the account. I did not ask him to." Dr. Pierce removed his gloves. "People rarely ask Dominic for the things he decides to provide. That does not make them gifts." The doctor studied her. "No. Sometimes it makes them obligations." Mason shifted near the door. Dr. Pierce closed his bag. "Dominic does not call me for household injuries." "What does that mean?" "Be careful with whatever this becomes." The doctor left. Mason remained in the doorway. Grace picked up 1 bottle. "What happened to Travis?" "He will not approach you again. Is he alive?" Mason's face did not change. "Yes." She released a breath. "Where is he?" "I am not authorized to tell you." "What did Dominic do?" "He removed a problem." "I am not a problem." Mason looked at her. "I did not say you were." He closed the door. By evening, whispers moved through the staff quarters. Travis's car was gone. His room had been emptied and his name had vanished from 2 Vale companies. On the second night, Lucy slipped a note beneath Grace's door. "I am sorry." Grace did not know whether Lucy meant for staying silent or for feeling relieved that Travis had chosen someone else. She tore the note into pieces. On the 3rd morning, the bruise had changed from black and purple to a sickly green along the edges. She dressed in her uniform and left the room. No one stopped her. When she entered the main kitchen, every sound disappeared. A knife paused above a cutting board. Water continued running into a sink. Steam rose from an uncovered pot. 20 people stared at her, not with pity, with fear. Grace stood inside the doorway, suddenly unable to move. Mrs. Whitmore came from the pantry. "You should still be resting. I have had 3 days. You are on light duty." The cooks returned to work without speaking. "I can clean the guest wing. Maria has it. Then give me something else." Mrs. Whitmore handed her a feather duster. "The library and the sunroom. Ground floor only." "A feather duster." "Yes." Grace lowered her voice. "They think I had Travis killed." Mrs. Whitmore looked past her toward the staff. "They know Mr. Vale acted. That is not the same thing. In this house it may be." Grace carried the duster into the east wing. Employees stepped aside when she passed. A footman, who had never learned her name, called her Miss Harper. At lunch, 2 maids left the table when Grace sat down. She ate alone. Being invisible had been humiliating. Being feared was worse. She was dusting the upper shelves in the library when the doors opened. Dominic entered alone. Grace felt him before she turned. He wore a dark suit, but no tie. Fatigue shadowed his eyes. "You are working. Mrs. Whitmore put me on light duty." Dominic closed the doors. The latch clicked. Grace tightened her grip on the duster. He noticed. The door is not locked. I did not say it was. You looked at it. I like knowing where the exits are. Dominic walked toward her. That is a useful habit. He stopped under the window light and examined her face. The swelling has improved. Dr. Pierce said I was lucky. Dominic's jaw tightened. Travis was lucky. Grace set the duster down. Is he alive? Yes. You promised. I remember. What did you do to him? I removed him from my organization and from your family. Those became the same decision. Grace searched his face. Where is he, Arizona? She blinked. Arizona. He has no access to Vale accounts, businesses, properties, or personnel. He will remain there under supervision. You exiled him. I gave him a life he did not earn. Grace looked away. Dominic came closer. He will not touch you again. You cannot know that. I know exactly where he sleeps. The certainty in his voice chilled her. You made that decision for me. Yes. You did not ask what I wanted. What did you want? I wanted to work. I wanted my paycheck. I wanted the Donnellys to leave Ethan alone. Dominic held her gaze. Done. Grace frowned. What does that mean? He walked to the reading table and placed a folded document beside the duster. Grace recognized the Donnelly seal. Her stomach dropped. Where did you get that? I bought it. She did not touch the paper. Bought what your father's debt. How much? 90,000. Grace stared at him. That was not yours to buy. It was held against you. I was paying it. You were paying interest on a debt that had already been paid twice over. You had no right. Dominic's expression hardened. They threatened your brother. That does not give you the right to replace them. I did not replace them. You own the paper now. Dominic picked up the document. He walked to the fireplace and held one corner over the flame. The paper darkened. Grace stepped forward. What are you doing? Ending it. Fire moved across the Donnelly seal. He released the page into the hearth. Grace watched $90,000 disappear into ash. There is no debt, Dominic said. Her throat tightened. In your world, nothing is free. That is true. Then what do you want? Dominic looked at her. I want the men who threaten you to understand that they are threatening me. That is not an answer. It is the part you are ready to hear. Grace felt panic rising. I cannot pay you back. I am not asking you to. You paid $90,000 and sent your cousin across the country because of a bruise. No. The single word stopped her. Dominic stepped closer. I sent Travis away because he believed my name allowed him to hurt a woman in my house. I bought the debt because men used your brother to keep you obedient. And me. His eyes settled on hers. You are the reason I noticed both. Grace backed away until the reading table touched her hip. You keep calling this protection. That is what it is. It feels like another kind of ownership. Dominic did not deny it quickly enough. Grace saw the answer before he spoke. Everyone in this house belongs to something, he said. A salary, a promise, a fear, a name. I belong to myself. Yes. The agreement surprised her. Then he continued. And you have spent 2 years selling pieces of yourself to men who never intended to let you finish paying. Grace's eyes burned. That was my choice. No. It was the only door left open. And now you are closing it. I am opening another. Dominic told her she would no longer work in the kitchens or service corridors. Her room would be moved to the 3rd floor. Grace stared at him. The family floor. Yes. I am not family. No. I am not a guest. No. Then what am I? Dominic's gaze moved to the fading bruise. Something I am not willing to leave unguarded. Grace shook her head. No. His expression changed by less than an inch. No, I am staying in my room. I am keeping my job. The basement is not secure. It was secure until your cousin put his hands on me. You were attacked outside, on your property. Dominic's voice lowered. That will not happen again. Because you are moving me into a prettier room, because nobody reaches the 3rd floor without passing armed security. Grace laughed once without humor. That is a cage. It has an unlocked door. The gate is guarded. For everyone. You own the guards. You own the cars. You own the road beyond the gate. Yes. Then the door is decorative. A faint expression touched his mouth. Not amusement exactly. Recognition. You are more observant than you pretend. I never pretended to be stupid. No. Only invisible. The word struck her. Grace looked toward the windows as the Atlantic struck the cliffs below. Dominic came nearer without touching her. Move upstairs. No. Grace, if I go, the staff will hate me more. They are afraid. That is not better. They will adjust. You cannot order people not to resent me. I can order how they behave. That is exactly the problem. Dominic studied her in silence. Grace forced herself not to lower her eyes. Finally, he said, Then make me earn the right to keep you there. I did not give you that right. No. His voice was quiet. You did not. For the first time, he sounded as though the fact mattered. Mason waited outside the library when the doors opened. 2 suitcases stood beside him. Grace recognized them as her own. Mrs. Whitmore must have packed the room while Grace was at lunch. The violation of it tightened her chest. Dominic noticed. No one will enter your new room without permission. They entered the old one. That will not happen again. Grace looked at Mason. He did not meet her eyes. Mason used a silver key to activate the private elevator. During the silent ascent, Grace watched her bruised reflection in the polished brass doors. The elevator opened into a corridor of dark walnut floors and muted silk walls. There were no service carts, no voices, no smell of bleach. Mason led her to a pair of doors at the end of the hall. He opened them. The suite faced the Atlantic. Gray water filled the windows. A fire burned in a stone hearth. The bed was larger than her basement room. Fresh clothes hung inside an open wardrobe. Grace stepped inside slowly. On a table near the window lay a silver key. Mason placed her suitcases beside the bed. This opens the bedroom, the elevator, the library, and the east terrace. Grace picked it up. The front gate, no. She closed her fingers around the key. Behind her, Mason moved toward the door. Dinner is at 8. I did not agree to dinner. Mason paused. That is between you and Mr. Vale. The door closed. It did not lock. Grace stood alone in the beautiful room, listening to the ocean below. The key was warm in her palm. It opened nearly everything Dominic had decided she was allowed to reach. The key opened nearly everything Dominic had decided she was allowed to reach. Grace placed it on the table. She did not unpack. At 7:45, someone knocked on the door. Grace remained beside the window. Who is it, Mrs. Whitmore? Grace opened the door. The older woman entered carrying a charcoal dress over one arm. A pair of black shoes rested inside a white box. Dinner begins at 8. I have a uniform. You are no longer expected to wear it. Expected by whom Mrs. Whitmore laid the dress across the bed. Mr. Vale. Grace touched the fabric. It was soft, heavy, and expensive. There is no label. It was altered this afternoon. Grace looked at her. How did anyone know my size? Mrs. Whitmore's expression remained carefully neutral. People notice more than you think. Grace almost laughed. For 2 years, nobody had noticed when her shoes split at the soles. Nobody had noticed when she skipped meals to send money to Ethan. Nobody had noticed Travis watching the younger maids. Then Dominic saw one bruise, and suddenly the entire house knew the shape of her body. "I am not wearing it." Mrs. Whitmore met her eyes. "Then go downstairs in your uniform." He did not order the dress. That surprised Grace. He chose it. Yes, but he did not order me to wear it. No. Mrs. Whitmore moved toward the door. "Grace." The use of her first name stopped her. "Mr. Vale does not rearrange his life for people. Whatever you decide to do, understand that." Grace looked at the dress. "Is that advice?" "It is a warning." Mrs. Whitmore left. Grace stood alone until the clock beside the fireplace read 7:52. She changed. The dress fit closely at the waist and fell below her knees. It covered the bruises on her wrist where Travis had held her. The neckline was modest. The shoes were flat. Someone had chosen clothing that would not frighten her. That thought disturbed her more than the fit. At 8, Mason waited outside. He glanced at the dress, then looked away. "This way." "I know where the dining room is." "Not this one." He led her through the private corridor to a smaller room overlooking the ocean. A long oak table stood beneath a low chandelier. Only 3 places had been set. Dominic sat at the head. Victor Shaw occupied the chair to his right. Grace stopped at the threshold. Victor looked from her dress to the fading bruise. Dominic rose. "Sit." He indicated the chair on his left. Grace crossed the room. Dominic waited until she was seated before returning to his own chair. Victor watched the exchange. The household staff usually eat downstairs. Dominic unfolded his napkin. "Grace is no longer household staff." Victor lifted his wine. "So I heard." 2 servers entered with covered plates. They placed roasted cod potatoes and vegetables before each person, then left without speaking. Grace kept her hands in her lap. Victor cut into his fish. $90,000 to erase a dead gambler's debt. Dominic reached for his glass. "Is there a question? The Donnellys believe you interfered with their business." "They are correct. They also believe you acted because of a maid." Grace felt Victor's attention settle on her. Dominic did not look away from him. "I acted because men threatened a woman living under my protection." Victor's mouth tightened. "That distinction will not matter when people begin looking for weakness. You are confusing attachment with weakness. In our business, they are often the same." The room became still. Dominic set down his glass. "Have I asked for your opinion on this? No. Then why am I hearing it? Because nobody else at this table will say it." Victor looked at Grace again. "She changes the way people see you." Grace found her voice. "I did not ask him to buy anything." Victor turned fully toward her. "No, you only needed to bleed where he could see it." Dominic's chair moved against the floor. The sound was quiet, but Victor stopped speaking. Dominic leaned back. "You will address her with the same respect you give me." Victor's jaw flexed. "She is not you." "No." Dominic's voice remained calm. "She is the person who decides whether this conversation ends with you walking out." Grace looked at him. Victor looked at her. For one sharp second, the entire room seemed to wait for her judgment. "I want him to stay," Grace said. Dominic's gaze moved to her. Victor gave a short nod. Dinner continued, but nobody tasted the food. After Victor left, Grace pushed her plate away. Dominic noticed. "You ate nothing. I am not hungry. You have barely eaten in 3 days. You have people watching that too, I notice." Grace stood. "You made me visible to people who kill visible things." Dominic remained seated. "You were visible the moment Travis spoke your name. You made it worse. I made it clear that touching you has consequences. And now the Donnellys think I matter to you. They are not mistaken. Grace pressed her fingertips against the table. You cannot decide that I matter and then expect the rest of the world to leave me alone. No. His honesty stopped her. Dominic looked toward the dark windows. That is why your brother is under protection. Grace's blood went cold. What did you say 2 men are watching his apartment? Another follows him to work. You put guards on Ethan without telling me I removed the men who were already watching him. The Donnellys. Yes. Grace moved around the table. I want to see him. No. The answer came too quickly. Then I am leaving. You are not. I will walk out of this room. You may. I will leave the house. Dominic stood. The gate will stop you. Then this is a prison. It is protection. You keep changing the word. He came closer. You cannot see him until I know the route is secure. Grace's hands shook. I do not know if he is alive. He is. I have your word. Yes, that is not enough. Dominic's face hardened. Grace forced herself to continue. You told me to make you earn the right to keep me here. Start now. Let me speak to my brother. Silence stretched between them. Then Dominic reached for the telephone near the wall. Tomorrow morning, he said. A secure video call. Grace did not move. 7:30. You will not be in the room. Dominic looked at her. No, that was not a request. Something almost like approval appeared in his eyes. 7:30, he repeated. The next morning, a laptop waited in the library. Mason checked the doors, then left. Dominic stood near the fireplace. Grace looked at him. You agreed. He walked out without argument. The screen lit. Ethan appeared from his apartment kitchen wearing a gray work shirt. His hair was damp. A coffee mug sat beside him. Grace. She touched the screen. Are you all right? He frowned. I should ask you that. What is this connection? 2 men have been parked outside for days. They are security. For who? For you. Ethan stared at her. What happened to your face? Grace had forgotten the bruise was still visible. I fell. Do not lie to me. The words struck harder than they should have. Grace looked toward the closed library door. I had trouble at work. What kind of trouble needs armed security? She could not tell him everything. Not yet. The debt is gone. Ethan stopped. What Dad's debt? It has been paid. With what money my employer handled it. Ethan's expression changed. No one pays $90,000 because an employee fell. Grace said nothing. Grace, where are you? I am safe. That is not what I asked. She gripped the edge of the table. I am at the estate. Come home. I cannot or will not. Grace closed her eyes. Ethan's voice softened. You have spent 2 years paying for something Dad did. I never asked you to. I was protecting you. From what? From having to live like this. Then why are you still there? Grace looked at the door again. I do not know. The call ended 10 minutes later. When Grace opened the library door, Dominic waited across the hall. He did not ask what Ethan said. Grace appreciated that more than she wanted to. Days passed. The 3rd floor remained quiet. The staff addressed Grace as Miss Harper. Meals appeared at scheduled hours. Nobody entered without knocking. Every evening at 8 she joined Dominic for dinner. At first they spoke only when necessary. Then one night Dominic brought several shipping reports to the table. Victor had marked a missing container as a clerical error. Grace noticed the warehouse number. That code is wrong. Dominic looked up. What? She pointed to the page. Warehouse 7 ends with a 7. This one ends with a 1. You remember warehouse codes I carried the quarterly ledgers? You read them? No. I noticed them. Dominic examined the documents, then called Mason. Within an hour, they confirmed that someone had rerouted shipments through a Donnelly-controlled pier. Dominic returned to the table after midnight. Grace was still there. You found something Victor missed. I found one number. One number is often enough. He sat across from her. What did you study before coming here, accounting? Where Bunker Hill? Why did you stop? My father died. Dominic said nothing. Grace watched the fire. You knew that already. I knew when he died. I did not know what it cost you. That was the first time Dominic asked about her life without using the answer as leverage. The dinners became less silent. Grace learned that Dominic hated sweet wine and never ate dessert. He slept in the East Wing because the West Wing had belonged to his father. A broken pocket watch remained in his desk because it had stopped at the exact hour his father was murdered. Dominic learned that Grace once played piano. She preferred old crime novels to romance books. She hated the smell of whiskey because Travis had carried it into the rain with him. The next evening, no whiskey appeared on the table. Dominic did not mention the change, neither did Grace. 1 week after she moved upstairs, a storm knocked out the power. Emergency lights turned the dining room red. A server dropped a glass near Grace's chair. She bent to help before anyone could stop her. A shard cut her palm. Dominic caught her wrist. Grace flinched. He released her immediately. The room fell silent. Dominic placed the first aid box on the table. Tell me what you need. Grace looked at him. He did not reach again. She sat down and opened her hand. Blood moved across her palm. Dominic waited. Grace extended it toward him. You can help. He cleaned the cut slowly. His hands were steady. When she tensed, he stopped. Too much pressure, no. He wrapped the bandage around her palm. The touch was careful, almost reverent. Grace watched his face. For the first time, she understood that restraint cost him something. Across the house, Victor noticed the changes. He noticed Dominic asking Grace's opinion before meetings. He noticed the revised shipping reports. He noticed that Grace no longer lowered her eyes when senior men entered a room. One evening, Victor stood beside Mason in the security office. She is becoming part of his decisions. Mason watched the camera feeds. She found the diverted shipments. That makes her useful. Yes, it also makes her dangerous. Mason turned toward him. To whom? To Dominic. Mason's expression hardened. Be careful. Victor looked at the camera showing Grace's corridor. Careful men still bleed. The following afternoon, Grace sat beside the window in her suite reading an accounting textbook Dominic had placed in the library. Rain moved across the glass. Something scraped beneath her door. Grace looked up. A folded piece of paper rested on the floor. She waited. No footsteps followed. Grace picked it up. The paper was a torn bakery receipt. 4 words had been written across the back. Donnelly has Ethan. Come alone. Grace read it twice. Her phone nearly slipped from her hand as she called Ethan. The call went directly to voicemail. She called the garage. The manager answered. Ethan has not been here all week. Grace looked toward the closed door. Dominic was somewhere downstairs. If she told him Boston could drown in blood before morning. She opened the wardrobe and pulled out the clothes she had worn in the basement. Old jeans, a gray sweater, scuffed boots. Grace removed the silver necklace Dominic had chosen and placed it on the bed. Then she picked up the key he had given her. The private elevator opened without a sound. Grace stepped into the dark corridor and pressed the button for the second floor. Her reflection stared back from the brass doors. Damp hair framed a pale face. The bruise was almost gone, but fear had returned to the same place beneath her skin. Donnelly has Ethan. Come alone. The words moved through her head with every beat of her heart. She called Ethan again. Voicemail. The elevator slowed. Grace slipped out before the doors opened fully and turned toward the linen rooms. The upper halls belonged to Dominic, his men, and the cameras hidden in the carved molding. The service passages belonged to people nobody saw. She pushed through a narrow door concealed behind a tapestry. Cold air touched her face. The passage beyond was unfinished stone barely wide enough for one person. A row of dim bulbs ran along the ceiling. Pipes trembled behind the walls. Grace had used this route hundreds of times while carrying laundry between floors. She knew which step creaked and which corner opened near the kitchen pantry. She also knew that the camera outside the laundry room had been broken since winter. Mrs. Whitmore had reported it 3 times. Nobody had considered the blind spot important. Grace reached the basement unnoticed. The old corridors smelled of bleach-damp concrete and hot metal from the boiler room. Voices drifted from the staff cafeteria. Plates struck trays. Someone laughed. For 2 years, those sounds had meant ordinary life. Now they sounded like something she had already lost. Grace moved past her old room. The door stood open. The narrow bed had been stripped. Her dresser drawers were empty. Nothing remained except a pale rectangle on the wall where she had once taped a photograph of Ethan. She stopped for less than a second. Then she continued. At the end of the corridor, an iron door opened onto the rear grounds. A red light above it showed the alarm was active. Grace removed a screwdriver from a shelf beside the maintenance closet. She had seen a groundskeeper reset the sensor after storms. The panel was old. If she lifted the lower cover and pressed the loose contact inward, the alarm would remain green for several seconds after the door opened. Her hands shook as she removed the first screw. The metal slipped from her fingers and struck the floor. Grace froze. No one came. She picked it up and tried again. The cover loosened. She pressed the contact. The red light changed to green. Grace opened the door and stepped into the storm. Rain struck her face hard enough to sting. Wind rushed across the grounds from the Atlantic, bending the hedges and throwing dead leaves against the stone walls. The lights near the garages blurred behind sheets of water. Grace pulled up the hood of her sweater. The service road curved toward the gatehouse, but armed guards watched that route. She turned in the opposite direction and ran toward the old greenhouse. Mud pulled at her boots. Her lungs burned. She kept moving. The greenhouse stood beyond a line of cedar trees, its glass walls clouded by rain. Behind it, the estate wall rose 10 feet above the ground. An old oak tree leaned toward the stone. One of its lower branches stretched close enough to reach the top. Grace had noticed it months earlier while cleaning storm debris. She had never imagined using it to escape. A flash of lightning revealed the tree. Grace crossed the last stretch of open ground. Inside the security office, Victor Shaw watched her appear on a monitor. The image flickered with rain. Grace ran toward the greenhouse exactly as he expected. Victor leaned closer. He had disabled the maintenance gate beside the wall 12 minutes earlier. If Grace continued past the tree, she would find it open. Beyond the gate, a dark sedan waited on the coastal road. The driver had been instructed to remain inside. Victor wanted to know whether Grace would approach the vehicle. He wanted proof that fear for Ethan could pull her from Dominic's protection. A door opened behind him. Mason entered. "What are you doing?" Victor did not turn. "Observing." Mason looked at the monitor. His face changed. "Why is Grace outside?" "She received information." "What information?" Victor remained silent. Mason crossed the room and grabbed the bakery receipt lying beside the keyboard. He read the words. Then he looked at Victor. "You used Ethan. I used his name. You sent her into the storm. She chose to run." Mason reached for his phone. Victor caught his wrist. "Dominic needs to see what she does. He needs to know what you did. He will know when the test is complete." Mason pulled free. You should pray she reaches the gate before he finds out. Upstairs, Dominic stood in the study while 3 senior men argued over the diverted shipments. Victor's empty chair remained at the table. Dominic looked toward it twice. The third time, his phone vibrated. "Mason," Dominic answered. "Speak." Grace left the 3rd floor. Dominic's face went still. The men at the table stopped talking. "When 6 minutes ago." "Where is she?" "Near the greenhouse." Dominic walked out of the room. Mason continued speaking. Victor planted a note. It said the Donnellys had Ethan. Dominic stopped in the corridor. For 1 second, every sound in the house disappeared. Then something broke behind his eyes. "Where is Victor?" "In security. Lock him inside." "Dominic, now." Dominic ended the call. He entered Grace's suite without knocking. The room was empty. Her accounting book lay open beside the window. The charcoal dress she had worn to dinner hung across a chair. The silver necklace rested in the center of the bed. Dominic picked it up. The chain was still warm. On the floor near the door he found the torn bakery receipt. He read the message once. His fist closed around the paper. Grace reached the oak tree and placed both hands against the wet bark. The lowest branch was higher than she remembered. She jumped and caught it. Pain shot through her bandaged palm. Grace pulled herself upward. Her boots scraped against the trunk. Rain ran into her eyes. She imagined Ethan tied to a chair in a warehouse. She imagined the Donnellys calling Dominic and demanding money territory or blood. If Dominic became involved, men would die. Ethan might die first. Grace reached for the next branch. Her foot slipped. She struck the trunk and nearly fell. A voice cut through the rain. "Grace." She looked down. Dominic stood 10 feet away. A black raincoat covered his suit. Water ran through his hair and down the hard planes of his face. Mason and 2 guards waited behind him. Dominic did not look angry. That would have been easier. He looked as though something inside him had been torn open. "Come down!" Grace tightened her grip on the branch. "They have Ethan." "No. I called the garage. He has not been there all week. Come down. I have to go. You are not going anywhere near the Donnellys. You cannot stop me." Dominic looked at the branch above her. "I can." Grace reached higher. The bark shifted beneath her hand. Her boot slipped again. This time she fell. Dominic crossed the distance before she reached the ground. He caught her around the waist, but the force pulled them both into the mud. Grace landed against his chest. For one breath, neither moved. Then she pushed away. "Let me go." Dominic rose and pulled her to her feet. Grace tried to move past him. He caught her arms. "They do not have Ethan. You do not know that. I know exactly where he is." Grace stopped fighting. Dominic loosened his grip. "He is in a private suite at the Harbor Hotel in Boston." She stared at him. "What?" "He has been there for 4 days." "No. He is guarded by Mason's men." "No." Grace shook her head harder. "He would have called me. His phone was replaced when we moved him." "You moved him." "The Donnellys began watching his apartment after I purchased the debt. You moved my brother without telling me." He agreed after my men showed him photographs of the surveillance. Grace looked toward Mason. He did not deny it. "You told Ethan before you told me. I told him enough to keep him alive. You had no right." Dominic's jaw tightened. "I had every right to remove him from danger. He is my family, and that makes him your weakness." The words struck her like a slap. Grace shoved Dominic. "You do not get to call him that." Dominic absorbed the blow without moving. "You used him to control me." "No. You hid him. I protected him. You keep changing the word." Rain ran down Grace's face, mixing with tears she had not felt begin. You bought the debt. You moved my room. You put men outside Ethan's apartment. You decide where I eat, where I sleep, and what I'm allowed to know. I kept you alive. You never asked how I wanted to live." Dominic opened his mouth. Grace hit his chest with both fists. "You put a target on us." He let her strike him. "The Donnellys were already watching Ethan. You made them care more. I made their interest visible. You made me visible." Her fists struck him again. "He is all I have." Dominic caught her wrists only when the bandage on her palm began to darken with blood. "Stop. Let me go. You are bleeding." "I do not care." "I do." Grace tried to pull free. Dominic held her wrists against his chest. Rain soaked through his shirt beneath the open coat. "I hate you." The words left her in a broken whisper. Dominic's eyes did not move from hers. "I know. You do not know anything. I know you were willing to walk into a Donnelly trap alone. What else was I supposed to do? Come to me, so you could fill Boston with bodies, so I could bring your brother home. You did not trust me with the truth." Dominic became silent. Grace's breathing slowed. His hands loosened around her wrists. "No," he said. The admission was almost lost beneath the storm. Grace stared at him. Dominic released her completely. "I trusted myself to carry it for you. I did not ask you to." "No." His face changed. "That was my mistake." Grace had heard men apologize when they wanted forgiveness. She had heard her father apologize after losing rent money at a card table. She had heard Travis apologize to Dominic for embarrassing the family. Dominic did not sound apologetic. He sounded altered by the recognition. Grace wiped rain from her eyes. "Then who wrote the note?" Dominic opened his hand. The bakery receipt was crushed inside it. "Victor." Grace looked toward the house. "Why to test whether you would run?" She turned back to Dominic. "You knew no. The gate near the greenhouse was open. Victor opened it." Grace glanced toward the wall. Through the rain, she saw the maintenance gate standing several inches from the stone. Beyond it, headlights glowed on the coastal road. A car waited in the darkness. Her stomach tightened. What was supposed to happen if I reached the road? Dominic looked at Mason. Mason answered. "Victor placed one of our drivers there." "One of yours?" "Yes. How was I supposed to know that you were not?" Grace looked at Dominic. The cold in his face had become something lethal. "He wanted to see whether I would get into the car." "Yes," Dominic said. And if I had run in the other direction, Dominic did not answer. The silence told her Victor had not planned for every possibility. Grace could have reached the cliffs. She could have been struck by a car on the coastal road. She could have encountered a real Donnelly lookout. Dominic turned to Mason. "Take her inside." Grace stepped away from him. "No." The guards became still. Dominic looked at her. "Grace, you are going to hurt Victor. He endangered you." "That is not an answer." Dominic's voice lowered. "He used your brother's life to manipulate you. He opened the perimeter and allowed you to believe you were walking into enemy hands. I know what he did. Then you understand why this is not negotiable." Grace moved closer. "You made Travis disappear because I gave you his name. You bought my debt because you decided it was dangerous. You moved Ethan because you decided I could not handle the truth." Rain gathered on her lashes. "This time I want to be in the room." Dominic stared at her. "No." "Then nothing has changed." His expression hardened. "This is an internal matter. It became my matter when he wrote Ethan's name. He is my underboss, and I am the person he tested." Dominic's control began to show cracks. Grace saw the conflict in his face. Every instinct in him demanded that he remove her from the danger, close the door, and make the decision alone. She waited. Finally, Dominic looked at Mason. "Bring Victor to the conference room." Mason nodded. "Alive," Grace said. Dominic's eyes returned to her. "He will arrive alive." "That was not what I meant." "I know." Inside Blackthorn House, the staff moved silently as Grace crossed the entrance hall beside Dominic. Mud covered her jeans. Water dripped from her sweater onto the marble. Mrs. Whitmore appeared near the staircase. Her eyes widened. Grace did not stop. Mason led Victor into the conference room 15 minutes later. Victor wore the same dark suit he had worn at dinner. His expression remained controlled, but one side of his mouth was bruised. Mason had not enjoyed locking him inside the security office. Dominic stood at the head of the table. Grace sat to his left. Victor noticed the placement. His gaze moved to her wet hair, her scraped palm, and Dominic's mud-covered clothes. "You wanted to see what I would do," Grace said. Victor remained standing. "Yes. Sit." His eyes shifted toward Dominic. Dominic said nothing. Victor took the chair across from Grace. Why Victor folded his hands on the table. Because Dominic has spent 15 years building an organization nobody could control through fear. Grace waited. "You changed that," Victor continued. "I did not ask to. That does not matter. It matters to me." Victor looked toward Dominic. "That is the problem." Dominic's face remained expressionless. Victor returned his attention to Grace. "Before you enemies threatened money, territory, and men, Dominic could lose any of those and continue functioning. Then Travis bruised your face and Dominic destroyed part of his own family. He sent Travis away. He stripped him of accounts protection and identity. In our world, that is a kind of death." Grace thought of Travis in Arizona, alive but erased. Victor continued. "Then Dominic spent $90,000 on a debt that had no strategic value. He moved your brother, changed security, changed his schedule, changed the people allowed into this house. You think that makes me dangerous. I think it makes you a weapon." Grace leaned back. "So, you frightened me to prove I could be used against him. I gave you a choice." "No." Her voice stayed calm. "You gave me a lie and watched panic make the decision." Victor's eyes narrowed slightly. "You still ran. I believed my brother was going to die. You did not tell Dominic, because I believed he would start a war." Victor looked toward Dominic. "She does not trust you." Dominic's expression did not change, but the statement landed. Grace answered first. "He did not trust me either." Victor looked between them. Grace placed her injured palm on the table. "I ran toward what I believed was danger. I did not sell information. I did not contact the Donnellys. I did not bargain with them. You intended to. I intended to bring Ethan home, by offering yourself, if necessary." Victor looked at Dominic. "This is exactly what I feared." Dominic's voice entered the room. "No." Victor turned. She admitted it. She admitted loyalty. To her brother. Dominic stepped closer to the table. "Loyalty does not become worthless because it existed before me." Victor's jaw tightened. "She left your protection. She left because I denied her information." The room became completely still. Victor looked at Dominic as though he had spoken in another language. Dominic continued. "You tested her loyalty by betraying mine. I protected your position. You endangered a woman under my roof after I made the consequences clear. I never intended for her to be harmed. Intent did not protect her from a 10-foot wall." Victor's voice hardened. "You are allowing emotion to rewrite the facts." Dominic placed both hands on the table. "The facts are simple. You manipulated Grace. You disabled estate security. You concealed an operation from Mason. You created an opening that the Donnellys could have discovered. Victor said nothing. Effective immediately, Mason controls all security and field operations. You retain your title until I decide whether it still belongs to you. Victor's face lost color. Dominic, you will surrender your access codes and weapons before leaving this room. 15 years. Dominic's eyes remained cold. You should have remembered them before you opened my gate. Victor looked at Grace. For the first time, there was no contempt in his expression. There was anger, but beneath it lay reluctant understanding. You asked to be here, he said. Yes. Why? Because men keep making decisions about my life in rooms I am not allowed to enter. Victor gave a faint, humorless smile. That answer may be the first intelligent thing anyone has said about this situation. Dominic straightened. Be careful. Victor looked at him. I am unarmed. That has never made you harmless. Grace turned toward Dominic. He keeps his life. Victor's expression became unreadable. Dominic looked at Grace. He endangered you. I know. He used Ethan. I know. Then why? Because killing him would prove he was right. Dominic said nothing. Grace continued. It would mean I can move your hand just by being hurt. Victor studied her. Dominic's eyes darkened. You can. I do not want that kind of power. That does not mean you do not have it. Then let me decide how I use it. The words remained between them. Dominic looked toward Victor. You heard her. Victor slowly nodded. Mason entered and collected Victor's weapon phone and security card. Before leaving, Victor stopped beside Grace. The Donnellys will not test you with paper. Grace met his eyes. I know. They will use someone you love. I know that too. Victor looked at Dominic once, then followed Mason into the corridor. The conference room door closed. Grace remained seated. Dominic stood across from her. You should change. I want to see Ethan. It is after midnight. I do not care. He is safe. I want to see him. Dominic looked tired for the first time. Fine. Grace rose. And I want every report about the Donnellys watching him. No. She stopped. Dominic closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, the refusal was gone. You may read the reports, all of them. Yes. I want Ethan to decide whether your men remain around him. Dominic's mouth tightened. He does not understand the risk. Then explain it. And if he refuses protection, that is his choice. No. Grace looked at him. Dominic exhaled slowly. I will not leave him exposed. Then give him enough information to make a real decision. He may still make the wrong one. So might you. Dominic stepped closer. I cannot protect people by allowing them to choose danger. You cannot protect people by taking every choice away. His gaze moved over her face. The fury that had filled him outside was gone. What remained was harder for Grace to understand. Fear. Dominic Vale was afraid. Not of the Donnellys. Of losing control over something he could not replace. You may leave the estate, he said. Grace stared at him. Without your permission, yes. Without guards, no. Despite everything, a breath of laughter escaped her. That is not freedom, it is the limit of my sanity. Grace looked away before he could see the effect of the answer. I want to go to Boston. The car will be ready in 10 minutes. I need dry clothes. Dominic moved toward the door. Grace called his name. He stopped. It was the first time she had addressed him without formality. Dominic. He looked back. Did you really mean it? What, that hiding things from me was a mistake? His expression became guarded. Yes. Then do not apologize by giving me another order. He nodded once. I will try. For another man, the words would have sounded small. From Dominic, they sounded like surrender. 20 minutes later, an armored sedan waited beneath the covered entrance. Grace wore dry jeans, a black sweater, and a coat Mrs. Whitmore had placed in her room. Dominic sat across from her in the rear compartment. Mason took the front passenger seat. The estate gates opened. Grace watched the iron divide and the coastal road appear beyond them. Nobody tried to stop her. Blackthorn House receded behind the rain. Dominic remained silent, one hand closed around the silver necklace she had left on the bed. Grace looked at the road toward Boston. For the first time since entering the Vale estate 2 years earlier, the gate had opened because she chose to leave. The gates disappeared behind the rain. Grace sat across from Dominic in the armored sedan, watching dark pine trees blur beyond the windows. Water ran across the glass in silver lines. Every few seconds, headlights appeared on the opposite side of the coastal road, then vanished into the storm. Dominic held the silver necklace in one hand. He had not spoken since they left Blackthorn House. Grace looked at the chain resting across his palm. "You brought it." His fingers closed around it. "You left it behind. I thought Ethan was in danger." "I know. I was not rejecting you." Dominic turned his face toward the window. "You were leaving my house. That is not the same thing. For me, it was close." Grace studied him. He looked composed, but she had learned to recognize the small signs beneath his control. His shoulders were too still. His thumb moved repeatedly across the silver links. A faint line had formed between his brows. The feared head of the Vale organization was not angry with her. He was afraid she might choose a life that did not include him. Grace looked toward the road again. "How long have the Donnellys been watching Ethan? 11 days. "And you moved him 4 days ago?" "Yes." "Why did you wait?" "We were identifying everyone involved." "That is not what I asked." Dominic's eyes returned to her. "I waited because I knew what you would do. You thought I would panic. I thought you would blame yourself." "I did. I know." Grace pressed her palms together. The cut beneath the bandage stung. "You do not get to protect me from feelings by hiding facts." Dominic looked down at her injured hand. "No. You keep saying that as if agreeing is enough. It is not." "Then what changes?" He answered after a long silence. "You will receive the same security reports I receive concerning you and Ethan. All of them. All of them. You will not decide which details I can handle." His jaw tightened. "No." Grace leaned back. It was not an apology spoken with softness. Dominic did not know how to offer softness without turning it into an order, but he was trying to open a door inside himself, and Grace understood how unnatural that was for him. The sedan entered Boston shortly after 1 in the morning. Rain reflected red and white across the streets. Restaurants were closing. Delivery trucks waited beneath loading docks. A lone man hurried along the sidewalk with his coat pulled over his head. Grace watched apartment windows pass above them. Ordinary lives. People sleeping without guards outside their doors. People who argued about rent work and forgotten groceries instead of debt collectors and armed men. She wondered whether she could still belong to that world. The Harbor Hotel stood near the waterfront, all pale stone and blue glass. Mason led them through a private entrance beneath the parking structure. 2 men in dark coats waited near an elevator. One nodded to Dominic. "Floor is secure." Grace looked at him. "You secured an entire floor." Dominic pressed the elevator button. "Half of it. That is supposed to sound reasonable, no?" The elevator opened on the 18th floor. Mason remained near the doors while Dominic walked beside Grace through the silent hallway. They stopped outside a suite guarded by 2 more men. Grace knocked. Footsteps moved inside. The door opened. Ethan stood there wearing sweatpants and an old Boston Red Sox shirt. His hair was uncombed. A bruise darkened one elbow, but otherwise he looked unharmed. Grace threw her arms around him. Ethan caught her tightly. For several seconds, neither spoke. She pressed one hand against the back of his head as if he were still a child she could hide behind her body. "You are all right. I am fine. You did not answer your phone." They took it. Ethan looked over her shoulder. His body stiffened when he saw Dominic. He moved Grace behind him. The gesture was so immediate that Grace almost laughed. Ethan was 19, narrow-shouldered and brave enough to stand between his sister and a man who could command half the room with one glance. "Who is he?" Dominic answered. "Dominic Vale." Ethan's face changed. He knew the name. Everyone in Boston knew some version of it. "You are her employer?" "Yes." "You put men outside my apartment?" "Yes." "You brought me here?" "Yes." Ethan looked at Grace. "What happened to your face?" The fading bruise felt suddenly visible again. Grace touched it. "A man at the estate hurt me." Ethan turned toward Dominic. "One of your men," my cousin Dominic said. "And he is still alive?" "Yes." Grace saw Ethan understand the meaning beneath the question. He looked at Dominic with a mixture of fear and disgust. "You people think keeping someone alive makes you merciful." Dominic did not respond. Grace stepped between them. "Ethan, sit down." "I am not sitting down. Please." He looked at her, then moved away from the door. The suite was larger than their old apartment. A half-eaten pizza sat on the coffee table beside several unopened bottles of water. A mechanic's manual lay open on the sofa. Grace noticed the details and felt some of the pressure in her chest release. Ethan had eaten. He had slept. He had been allowed to read. He had not been tied to a chair in a warehouse. Grace sat across from him. Dominic remained near the window. He gave them distance without leaving. Ethan looked between them. "Tell me everything." Grace began with their father. She told Ethan how much he had owed. She explained the payments, the threats, and the calls from the Donnelly crew. She told him why she accepted the job at Blackthorn House and why she had lied about the money she earned. Ethan's expression moved from confusion to anger. "You paid them every week?" "Yes." "For 2 years?" "Yes." "Why did you not tell me you were 17? I am not 17 now. I wanted you to finish school, so you gave them your life instead." Grace lowered her eyes. Ethan leaned forward. "I could have worked more. You already worked. I could have left Boston. You had a future here. So did you." The words entered the room quietly. Grace looked at him. Ethan's eyes were wet. "You were going to finish college. That was before Dad died." "No. That was before you decided his mistakes belonged to you." Grace did not know how to answer. Dominic stood near the window with his back partly turned, but she knew he was listening. Ethan pointed toward him. "And now what?" "The debt is gone, because he paid it. He bought it and burned the note." Ethan stared at Dominic. "What does she owe you?" "Nothing." Ethan laughed once. "No one like you spends $90,000 for nothing." Dominic looked at him. "You are correct." Grace turned sharply. Dominic continued before she could speak. "She owes me nothing." "That does not mean I wanted nothing. What did you want?" Dominic's gaze moved to Grace. "Her safety." Ethan stood. "That sounds good when you say it slowly." Ethan. "No. You moved me without telling her. You locked her inside that house. The doors were not locked. The guards were." Dominic did not deny it. Ethan looked at Grace. "Are you there because you want to be?" The room became silent. Grace looked toward Dominic. He did not move. He did not answer for her. "That mattered. I do not know," she said. Pain crossed Ethan's face. Grace continued. "I know I was safe there. I know I was afraid there. I know Dominic protected us, and I know he made choices that were not his to make. Ethan looked at Dominic. Then let her leave. Dominic's expression remained controlled. She can. Grace stood slowly. You mean that? Yes. Without losing Ethan's protection. Yes. Without owing you the debt. Yes. Without punishment. Something dark moved through Dominic's eyes at the word. Yes. He reached inside his coat and removed a thick folder. He placed it on the table. Grace opened it. The first document was a formal release from all claims connected to her father's debt. The second showed the transfer of the original note into a Vale-controlled company and its final cancellation. Another page listed a bank account in Grace's name. She looked at the balance. It contained her accumulated wages, unused leave, and a severance payment large enough to support her and Ethan for months. Beneath that was information from Bunker Hill Community College. Application forms, class schedules, accounting courses. Grace looked at Dominic. What is this A door? You arranged this on the drive. The account already existed. You had a severance account prepared. I knew there was a possibility you would leave. When? After our first dinner. Grace stared at him. You thought about letting me go. No. Dominic's honesty made Ethan look up. I thought about what I would have to give you if you demanded it. Grace touched the college forms. And Ethan? His protection remains, whether you return or not. Ethan crossed his arms. I do not want men following me forever. You have the right to refuse them, Dominic said. Grace looked at him. He continued. You will receive the threat reports first. Make your decision after reading them. Ethan sat down again. The room grew quiet. Grace closed the folder. I need to speak to my brother alone. Dominic's face revealed nothing. Then he nodded. Mason will be outside. He walked toward the door. Before leaving, he placed the necklace beside Grace's hand. The door closed behind him. Ethan looked at the silver chain. He scares me. He scares everyone. That is not an answer. Grace picked up the necklace. He scares me too. Did he hurt you? No. Did he threaten you? Yes. Ethan's face hardened. Grace. He threatened the people who might hurt me. He ordered me to stay inside. He decided things for me. He did not hit me. That is a very low standard. I know. Ethan leaned back and rubbed both hands over his face. Do you love him? Grace looked at the closed door. I do not know if what I feel has a clean name. That sounds like something people say when the answer is dangerous. It is dangerous. Do you want to go back? Grace looked around the hotel suite. She could stay. She could finish school, find an apartment, and return to a life where she counted every dollar but chose every door she opened. Dominic had given her the means to leave. That changed the shape of the choice. She thought of the study lamp revealing her bruise. She thought of his rage, his control, and the way he stopped touching her when she flinched. She thought of the first time he asked what she needed. She thought of him standing in the rain and admitting he had been wrong. I want to go back differently. Ethan watched her carefully. What does that mean? It means I do not go back as his maid. You are not his maid anymore. I do not go back as his prisoner either. Ethan glanced toward the door. Do you think men like him understand the difference? No. Grace closed her hand around the necklace. But he can learn. Dominic returned when Grace called. He entered alone. Ethan remained beside his sister, but he no longer stood in front of her. Grace placed the folder on the table. I have conditions. Dominic looked at her. Tell me, Ethan chooses where he lives and works. Yes. He receives enough information to decide whether he accepts your protection. Yes. I receive every report concerning threats against either of us. Yes. No one enters my room without permission. Dominic's jaw moved slightly. Yes. That includes you. I understood. I return to school. I will arrange transportation. I did not ask you to arrange it. A faint shadow of amusement entered his face. How do you intend to travel, I will decide. Dominic nodded. Grace continued. I am not introduced as your possession. His expression became colder. You dislike the word. I dislike being treated like an object. You are not an object. Then do not speak as if I belong to you. Dominic stepped closer. You do belong to me. Ethan stood. Grace raised one hand, stopping him. No, she said to Dominic. That is the part you have to change. Dominic's eyes remained fixed on hers. Grace did not lower her gaze. If I return because I choose you. Choice does not exist if you call ownership love. The words struck something deep in him. He looked away for one moment. When his eyes returned, the possession was still there. Dominic Vale could not erase his nature in one night, but he could decide what he did with it. You choose whether to stay, he said. Yes. You choose whether I enter your room. Yes. You choose what work you do. Yes. His voice lowered. And if someone harms you, Grace understood the question. You tell me what you know. And then, we decide together. The answer clearly pained him. Together. One more condition. Dominic waited. If you ever use Ethan to frighten, test, or control me, I leave. His face became completely still. Agreed. Grace held out her hand. Dominic looked at it. This is not a business arrangement. No, business arrangements are easier. That is why you need this one. Dominic took her hand. His grip was warm and firm. Grace felt the dangerous promise beneath it. He was not becoming harmless. He was allowing her to stand close enough to guide where the danger landed. Ethan watched them. I still do not like him. Dominic released Grace's hand. That is mutual. Grace looked between them. Try again. Dominic studied Ethan. Your sister saved your life before I knew either of you. Ethan said nothing. I will not ask you to trust me. Dominic continued. I will give you evidence. It was the closest thing to respect Ethan was likely to receive from him that night. The storm had weakened by the time Grace returned to Blackthorn House. Dawn touched the Atlantic with a dull gray light. The iron gates opened. Grace watched them from the back seat. This time the sight did not feel like a vault closing. The gates had opened when she left. They opened again when she chose to return. Mrs. Whitmore waited in the entrance hall. Several members of the staff stood near the kitchen corridor. News traveled quickly inside the estate. They knew Grace had run. They knew Dominic had followed. They knew Victor had lost his authority. They did not know what Grace had decided. Mrs. Whitmore looked toward Dominic. Grace noticed. Tomorrow morning, she said, I want a complete record of staff injuries from the past year. Mrs. Whitmore blinked. Miss Harper, medical injuries, unpaid leave, missing wages, and security complaints. The older woman looked toward Dominic again. Grace's voice remained calm. Do not look at him, I asked. The staff became very still. Mrs. Whitmore returned her attention to Grace. Yes, Miss Harper. I also want Lucy transferred away from private guest rooms. Mrs. Whitmore understood immediately. Yes. Dominic stood several feet behind Grace. He said nothing. His silence gave her more authority than a speech would have. Grace went upstairs and slept for 6 hours. When she woke, the necklace rested where she had left it beside the bed. Dominic had not entered. At 7 that evening, Mason brought the Donnelly reports to the library. Grace read every page. Photographs showed men outside Ethan's apartment, his garage, and a diner he visited after work. Financial records connected the Donnelly crew to a waterfront construction project and 3 shipping companies. Grace spread the documents across the table. One warehouse number appeared repeatedly. It matched the code she had noticed in Dominic's ledger. Dominic entered after midnight. He stopped when he saw the papers. "You should be asleep. You should have shown me these sooner." "Yes." Grace pointed to the records. "The diverted shipments are not only theft." Dominic approached the table. "The Donnellys are using your route. They are using one of my routes." "No. They are hiding equipment and cash inside a legitimate redevelopment project." Dominic studied the documents. Grace continued. "If you attack them, the city investigates the violence. If you expose the financial connection, the banks freeze their money." Dominic looked at her. "You want to use the law. I want to use whatever leaves fewer bodies." Victor entered the library behind Mason. He no longer carried a weapon. His security access had not been restored. He looked at Grace's arrangement of the reports. "The Donnellys will not surrender because a bank sends a letter." "No," Grace said. "They surrender when the union refuses their trucks. The bank freezes the project, and Dominic offers them one route out." Victor glanced at Dominic. "She has been reading for 6 hours. She has been thinking for 2 years," Dominic said. Grace looked at him. Victor leaned over the table. "What route?" "They abandon the harbor project, leave Ethan alone, and sign over the companies moving through Vale property." "And if they refuse?" Grace looked toward Dominic. "Then he does what he was going to do anyway." Dominic's mouth almost curved. Victor studied her for a long moment. "You want them to know violence is waiting, but you do not want to use it first." "Yes, that may look weak. Only if they believe Dominic needs violence to win." The words settled into the room. Victor looked at Dominic. "You intend to let her sit in on the negotiation?" Dominic answered. "Yes." Victor's eyes returned to Grace. "This house is becoming strange." Grace gathered the reports. "It was strange before I arrived." The meeting took place 2 nights later in a private dining room above a closed restaurant in Boston. Grace sat at Dominic's left. Across from them sat Patrick Donnelly and 2 of his senior men. Patrick was broad, gray-haired and dressed like a man attending church. His expression changed when he saw Grace. "This is the Maid." Dominic's voice became cold. "Her name is Grace Harper." Patrick looked at the documents before him. "You brought her to a business meeting. She found the business you hid inside my port." Grace opened the financial report. "The bank receives this packet tomorrow morning unless you sign." Patrick laughed. "You think paperwork frightens me?" "No," Grace said. "Losing access to every legitimate account connected to your construction companies might." His smile faded. Grace continued. "The union has also been informed that your trucks are operating without approved contracts. By sunrise, your vehicles stop moving." Patrick looked at Dominic. "You let her speak for you now." Dominic did not take his eyes from him. "She is speaking for herself." Grace placed the agreement on the table. "The debt against my family is gone. You will acknowledge that formally. You will stop watching Ethan. You will surrender your interest in the harbor project." Patrick leaned forward. "And what do we receive?" Dominic answered. "You leave the room alive with enough business remaining to avoid desperation." Patrick studied him. "That is not generosity." "No." Dominic's voice remained calm. "It is the final offer." Patrick signed. Grace watched his pen move across the page. The man who had kept her awake for 2 years reduced his claim to ink beneath her hand. When the Donnelly men left, Victor remained near the door. He looked at Grace. "You ended a conflict without firing a shot." Dominic was sitting beside me. They knew the shots were still available. Grace closed the folder. That was the point. Back at Blackthorn House, Grace entered Dominic's study. The brass lamp burned on his desk. It was the same light that had revealed her bruise. Dominic stood near the fireplace holding the broken pocket watch. Grace closed the door. "When did you first notice me?" He looked at her. "The day you returned my shipping manifest. That was 2 days before Travis hurt me." "No." Dominic placed the watch on the mantel. "I noticed you months earlier." Grace waited. "You gave half your dinner to a kitchen worker whose wages had been docked." "Lucy." "Yes. You saw that I see more than people believe. So do maids. That is why you remembered the warehouse code." Grace walked toward the desk. "Why did you never speak to me?" "Because noticing you was inconvenient." "And the bruise made it convenient?" "No." Dominic's expression darkened. The bruise made inconvenience irrelevant. He moved closer. "I built this house so nothing could reach me." "Men police betrayal grief." "Then I saw what Travis did to you inside my walls." Grace remained still. "I was angry because he hurt you," Dominic said. "I was also angry because I failed to see the danger standing in my own house. You cannot see everything. I have survived by believing I can." "That sounds exhausting." "It is effective. Not always." A faint smile touched his mouth. "No." Grace reached for the pocket watch. The hands had stopped at 2:17. "My father gave it to me the night before he died," Dominic said. "It stopped when the hospital called." "You keep it because it reminds you of him. I keep it because it reminds me that control ends without warning." Grace placed the watch back on the mantel. "You cannot control whether I stay." "I know." "Do you?" Dominic looked toward the window. The Atlantic moved in darkness beyond the glass. "Your room is yours. Ethan is free. The account remains in your name. If you leave tomorrow, nobody will stop you." Grace studied him. "And what will you do?" "Spend every day giving you a reason to return." It was not a plea. Dominic did not know how to plead. It was a vow spoken by a man who had built his life on certainty and now had none. Grace stepped closer. "You are still a monster. I know. You cannot threaten everyone who upsets me." "I can. You cannot. That may require negotiation." Grace touched the back of his neck. Dominic closed his eyes. His breath left him slowly as he leaned into her hand. The gesture was small, but Grace understood what it cost. The most dangerous man in the room was allowing someone else to decide what happened next. Grace kissed him. Dominic did not touch her. Not at first. His hands remained at his sides while she pressed her mouth to his. He waited until Grace took one of his hands and placed it at her waist. "Grace." "Yes." Only then did he pull her closer. The kiss deepened slowly. There was no force in it. No command. Only restraint hunger and the frightening tenderness of a man who knew exactly how much damage his hands could cause. Several weeks later, the long dining table at Blackthorn House was filled with Dominic's senior men. Victor had regained part of his position. Mason retained control of security. Mrs. Whitmore had submitted the staff reports Grace requested. Medical leave was now paid. Locked service exits had been repaired. Lucy no longer worked near private guest rooms. Grace sat at Dominic's left with a financial report open before her. One of the men pointed to a column of numbers. "This projection cannot be correct." He directed the question toward Dominic. Dominic looked at Grace. She found the error. "Ask her." Every face at the table turned. Months earlier, Grace would have lowered her eyes. She would have become part of the chair, the wall, the silent machinery keeping powerful men comfortable. Now she placed one finger on the report. The numbers are correct. Your shipping costs are inflated because 2 contractors are billing the same route. The man looked closer. You are certain? Yes. Victor leaned back. She usually is. The meeting continued. Outside, waves struck the granite cliffs. Rain moved against the windows, but nobody mistook the sound for gunfire. Dominic leaned toward Grace. Do you regret coming back? Grace looked around the table, then at the man who had once asked who bruised her face and nearly torn apart Boston over the answer. Ask me again when you stop frightening the accountants. A rare smile moved across his face. I never make promises I cannot keep. Grace turned back to the ledger. She had not escaped the monster's house. She had changed her place inside it. The cage still had iron beneath the gold. The man beside her was still dangerous, but the key was in her hand. The woman in the wallpaper was gone. The queen had work to do.